So anyway, with that, moving to the main event, Len, I'll just share. I've known Len for a few years. I've seen him speak, participated in panels with him. He's a real thought leader in the industry. Procter & Gamble is making huge waves. I'll let Peter give a more formal introduction, but Len, we're truly excited for you to join us today and look forward to this conversation.
Thank you.
Peter.
Thanks, David. That's great. No, to echo that, Len, it's Peter Lacey here from Accenture, and very pleased to co-chair this task force with David. I will keep it very brief. I think it's extremely generous of you to share your time today. I think the work that you've been doing at P&G to start to embed some of the principles of closed loop and eliminating the concept of waste in your own business, but also thinking that through in the context of consumers, is pioneering, and we look forward to hearing more about that. So without further ado, Len, let me ask you to take up the mic, and what I'll do is just encourage people to post questions as we go via the chat function, which I can see, and we'll put some of those to you at the end, Len, and also allow people to ask questions live towards the end of the presentation. So over to you.
All right, very good, thank you. And can I get there it is. Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity to talk to everyone about P&G's program in sustainability. I don't know how much individuals know about Procter & Gamble, so I put this first slide up. You may not know about P&G as a corporation, but hopefully you know the company by its brands. P&G is the largest consumer products company in the world. We sell 300 branded products in 180 countries around the world. Over 4 billion people use our products every day. And I put this slide up, one, to introduce you to the company, but also to help illustrate for you why something like sustainability is so important to Procter & Gamble. When you're a company of this size selling these kinds of products, it is just imperative that your products are safe for the environment and safe for any compartment in which they go into. And that's why largely the company over the years has seen environmental sustainability as a responsibility, ensuring that the safety and the compliance of our products is paramount. Although I'm the Vice President of Sustainability, I actually lead a department of 720 individuals. About 500 of these people have the job of ensuring the human and environmental safety of the new products that P&G puts into commerce. And about 200 PhDs sit in my department, so we have a lot of intellectual rigor within the organization and a lot of intellectual caliber individuals that help ensure that these products are indeed safe as they go out. So historically, we had seen sustainability as a responsibility. But as we started getting into the 2000s, we began to see more and more interest in sustainability, coming from consumers, coming from NGOs, governments, coming from academics, around the world. And we began to think, is there a way in which we could use environmental sustainability as an opportunity to actually build Procter & Gamble's business? Through the products that we sell, or through, as we term it here, operational eco-efficiency, looking at reducing the environmental footprint of our operations as a means of cost savings. And what I'd like to talk to you today about is this opportunity piece that we saw. And I'm going to talk it from the standpoint of product innovation and then talk it from the standpoint of our operations. Let's begin with product innovation. As we started to get into this, and I said it was the early 2000s, mid-2000s, we looked in the marketplace and we saw that there were already a lot of products out there that claimed to be green, that claimed to be environmentally sustainable. But what we noticed about those products is not many people bought them. They were usually a very small share in the category. Many times they were only sold in specialty stores. And as we looked at this, we said, well, we could do the same thing. I mean, P&G is a very innovative company. We could very easily put out products that are similar to that, products, unfortunately, that not many people would buy. But because of our scale, because of our size, and the fact that we have 9,000 R&D people, we thought, could we do something a little bit better, a little bit bigger? But in order to do that, we really had to understand how consumers thought about sustainability. And these are some of the data that we generated. We find that there's a very small niche of consumers, about 15%, and these are people that are really engaged in the environmental movement, and engaged to the point that they are willing to accept some sort of trade-off, either a higher cost or a decrease in performance, in order to purchase a product that claims to be green or sustainable. And these are the people that were buying those products that were already in the marketplace at the low shares. We find that there's a huge middle. We call them the sustainable mainstream. Vast majority of consumers, 75%. And these are people that are eco-aware. You know, they want to do the right thing, but they are not willing to accept a trade-off. They will not pay a higher price, and they will not accept a decrease in performance in order to buy a green product. But what we also know about these people is that they will reward you, in the sense that if you give them a product that meets all their needs in value and performance, and in addition, you enable them to be sustainable, then they will purchase your product. And there's a group off to the right. These are called, we call them the basic group, and these are individuals that just generally are not engaged today in any of this. And actually, there's an interesting little tidbit here. In that basic group, in the United States, I can carve out about half of those people, about 5% of them, are what are termed never-greens. And these are people that are actually hostile to the environmental movement, and we find them somewhat entertaining to talk to at times. But what we've seen over the years is that this group, this three groupings of a small group that's highly engaged, a middle group that is also engaged but will not accept trade-offs, and then the basic group off to the right is something that's been consistent over time. We've been running those studies about 5 years, and it's also been consistent around the world, whether we're talking the U.S. or Europe, developed geographies, developing geographies. So we think this is very, very powerful data as we go forward. So as we looked at these data and the power of them, we decided that as a corporation, we would target the sustainable mainstream. And we would do that by developing products that enable the consumers to be environmentally sustainable through the use of the product, but we would not ask them to accept a trade-off. We will not ask them to pay a higher price, and we would not ask them to accept a decrease in performance. So how do we go about developing such products? Well, we use a tool called life cycle assessment. This is actually a tool that P&G helped develop and pioneer in the 1980s and 90s. And it's a tool that enables one to quantify the environmental impact that a product or a process has across its entire life cycle, from the creation of the raw materials to manufacturing, distribution, to the ultimate use in the home. And we use this tool to assess our products and our processes to find where the biggest environmental impact is. And then once we identify that, we then target our R&D efforts to find ways to address that impact, to be able to reduce that impact, and then from that lead to a product that enables a consumer to be sustainable by reducing that specific environmental impact. And let me show you an example of one of these. This is one that's focused on energy. So this is Procter & Gamble's energy footprint. So as a corporation, we quantified the energy that is used across the life cycle for all of our products. And if you look off to the right side here, those are the steps in the life cycle. The other axis are all the products that P&G makes, the product classifications. And then the axis going up is total energy. So for every product that P&G sells, for each step in its life cycle, we quantified total energy. And I think you don't need to be very bright to see what drives Procter & Gamble's energy footprint. It is the consumer use of laundry detergents. Now, if we penetrate that number a little bit more, we find that about 80% of it is related to the heating of water for laundry. So here we have an $85 billion company, 300 brands, billions of consumers using the product, and our energy footprint is driven by that one single thing, use in the home by laundry products, and it's predominantly the heating of water for laundry. So if you want to impact that metric, you come out then with these products. And this is why Procter & Gamble a few years ago came out with Tide Cold Water, and then in Europe, Ariel Cool Clean. And these are products that are specially designed to give great performance in cold water, performance the consumer expects, and they don't cost more than the traditional products. So there's no trade-offs for the consumer. Now, I'm probably the only one that gets excited about laundry detergent on this call, but if you look at some of these numbers, maybe I can excite you all also. If everyone in the U.S. that used hot or warm today were to switch to cold, we would save about 4% of the energy used in the households today in the U.S. The household, about 4.4 million consumers in the U.S. If I were to convert that to CO2 equivalents, you're looking at about 4 to 5% of the U.S.'s Kyoto target. So in something as simple as laundry detergent or something as simple as how people wash their clothes, one can make a very meaningful impact in the environmental metric of CO2 emissions or the environmental metric of energy. Now, the concept is there, getting consumers to wash in cold water, but there is a challenge to a company like us as we go down this path. One is you have to have a product that does not ask the consumer to have a trade-off, and secondly, you have to convince the consumer to wash in cold water. So let me talk a little bit about both of those, and the first is really about the product formulation. Let's get into laundry detergent a little bit here. You're probably going to learn more about laundry detergent today than you've had in your entire lives, but bear with me a little bit here. If we think about how a laundry detergent cleans clothes in a washing machine, there's really three energies that are present there. You have the mechanical energy of the machine, you have thermal energy coming from the heating of the water, and then you have chemical energy coming from the detergent formulation. Now, if we decrease the water temperature, okay, so we're decreasing that energy, in order to get the same performance, we have to compensate somewhere else. Well, we're not able to really compensate on the mechanical piece because the machine that the consumer is using is not going to change. Therefore, we must increase the cold water cleaning performance based on the chemistry. So this is work that we had to do on the formulation of the product to increase its ability to clean in cold water. So if you think about how the complexity of something like that is, it's very hard because one is there's very regional differences in the cold water or the water that's coming into homes. So if you just take your washing machine and you set it on cold, well, the variation in the water that's coming into the house can really be significantly different. So if you're in Florida in the summertime, that ambient temperature of the water coming in is 80 degrees. If it's the wintertime in Minnesota, you're at around 40 degrees. So as we are now having to develop a formulation that's going to meet all these consumer needs, we are confronted with the complexity that the water temperatures around the world are going to be very different. Machine complexity is different. You know, how the machines actually operate is very different. So as we're trying to come up with a formulation that cleans in cold water without any performance deficits, we are confronted with the complexity that various machines work very differently, the amount of water that they use, and then also the wash times. We also find that there is a complexity around this in global wash conditions. How people wash clothes in the U.S. is very different than how people wash clothes in the EU, both in typical ambient temperatures coming in, the cycle time, water usage, or whatever. So the challenges faced by Procter & Gamble's R&D community was to come up with a detergent that would wash in cold water with the same performance the consumers expected as they were washing in hot or warm, taking into account all this various complexity and all these varying conditions around the world. A huge challenge for the individuals that were working on the project. If you look at how a detergent is constructed, there are many types of ingredients that are used. Core ingredients, builders, chelants, surfactants, these are the actual ingredients that did the power horse of the cleaning. Things like enzymes and bleach, are performance additives, and then some things for aesthetics. What I'd like to talk to you about is some of the research that we did on the surfactants and the research that we did on the enzymes to help boost their performance so that they were able to perform better in cold water. Let's talk first about the surfactants. Surfactants are really the workhorse chemical that are present in laundry detergents that do the cleaning. And the way they work is very simple. This is a pictorial of a molecule off here to the left. There is two aspects to the molecule. One is a water-loving aspect, which we call a hydrophilic end, and the other is a water-hating end, or it's the little tail there, and we call that a hydrophobic end. And what this molecule is able to do is it's able to bridge the interface between, say, a stain that is on the fabric and the wash solution or the water that the fabric is immersed in. And by being able to bridge that interface, this chemical has the ability to help lift the stain off of the fabric and put it into the solution. Now, what's important, though, is for this to be able to work, these surfactant molecules need to be free like this so that they can form that interface between the soil and the wash solution. Now, what you find, though, is that at a certain concentration, these individual surfactant molecules begin to clump up and form crystals. And when they form crystals, they are not efficacious in cold water. They are monomers and can function very well at lifting detergents. As you increase the concentration of the surfactant, if you don't increase the temperature at the same time, you find that these monomers will begin to clump together and form the crystals. And you can see here on this graph how at the high concentrations at cold water, they're crystals. At high concentrations at warm water, they are the free monomers. And this is the basic chemistry of the surfactants that were generally used in the detergent. So what P&G did is we developed a new surfactant molecule that was able to maintain its monomer state, this active state, in cold water. And it was something that took us several years to do, but it was imperative that a piece of research like this was done and a new chemical like this was developed, because if we did not, we would not be maintaining the cleaning performance of the product in cold water as the consumers were seeing in the warm. A second thing we looked at are enzymes. And enzymes are very important in cleaning and laundry detergents. We have proteases in there that help break down protein-based soils. We have cellulases that can work on cellulosic soils such as grass. We have amylases, which are enzymes that can help break down starch-based soils. And we have lipases that can work on lipid-based soils. And if you think about what warm water does, warm water actually helps in the more lipid or fat-soluble stains. So what P&G had to do was to rebalance the enzymes that were present in the detergent to help boost that performance in those lipid or those fat types of stains that we had. So these are a couple of things that we did from an R&D standpoint to boost the performance of the detergent in cold water so that mainstream consumer, when she were to use our detergent in cold water, she would not see a decrease in performance. And that is very key in this because, this mainstream consumer will not accept a trade-off. So if he or she is not seeing the performance, they will not switch to the practice of the cold water washing, which is so important in order to get the environmental benefit. So we fixed here the technical piece to have a detergent that worked. Now we had to motivate the consumer to actually switch from warm water to cold water. And that in and of itself was a challenge. I asked you all on the phone to think about your laundry habits. I expect that you wash some loads in hot or warm, and you wash some loads in cold. And you probably have reasons for doing that. And I'm asking you now that for those loads you wash in hot or warm, to switch to cold. Is that something that's easy for you to do? Will you believe that you will get the performance that I'm telling you you will get with this new detergent? And this is what we confront as we work with consumers in this really the desire or motivation on their part to want to change, but the tension preventing them from changing because they don't believe it's going to work. So how do we do this? How do we change that behavior? Well, first, where do we need to focus? About 38% of the loads today in the world are washed in cold water, but 80% of those non-cold water loads, those ones washed in the hot or warm, it's only in about 8 countries, largely in the United States. So this helps us focus where we need to put our efforts. And really, the way to change consumer behavior is education. And we've been able to do that by educating the consumers in the store, at the shelf. We've been able to educate them externally via the internet and media, and then also working with some credible external stakeholders to help bring the message for us. This is some of the stuff that we did in the store. These are displays that you would see typically in, say, a Walmart store in the U.S., a Costco store perhaps. The Ariel, this would be a display that you would see in a Tesco store or Carrefour, for example. And these are the things that we did at shelf to help consumers understand the value of what they're doing. Now, what do you see here that's interesting? We are not focusing on an environmental message here, are we? We're focusing on the savings of energy and the savings of money. And that's very important in all of this stuff, because what we learned in our consumer understanding is that if we went out with a very strong environmental message, we would not necessarily be talking to the mainstream consumer. We find that those strong environmental messages are ones that the niche consumer would be responsive to. We wanted to talk to the mainstream consumer, and in order to get the mainstream consumer's attention and get that individual to switch their habit, the focus had to be on the savings of energy and the water, not the environment. We don't care why someone washes in cold water, whatever reason, whether it's to save money, save energy, fabric care is another reason. We wanted the habit change. So this is why this focus went this way. This is some of the stuff that we did on the internet and working with the media, having consumer reports, groups like that write articles for us, allowing consumers to go on the internet and be able to post and see how much energy they can save by washing in cold water, dropping coupons when appropriate to kind of get the habit change. So that was another tool we used. What I'd like to do now is show you some of the advertising that we did. This is a commercial that showed in the United States. And I hope what you saw there was a focus on the savings of money and the savings of energy. There was no environmental message in that. Again, the intent is to target the mainstream consumer. The next commercial I'd like to show you, this is one that was in Europe. It had a slight environmental focus to it. But most of the advertising that we did in Europe was focused on the savings of money and the savings of energy. We do know that the Europeans are, especially Western Europeans, are a little more receptive to some of the environmental messages. That's why we went out with this commercial. But what I will tell you, though, is that those data that I showed you in the beginning of the mainstream consumer being the vast majority, you do see that in Europe, too. Even though some may feel that Europeans are a little more receptive, a little more on the environmental side than maybe some other geographies, that may be true, but we don't see that necessarily in their purchase habits. What someone tells you in an interview and then what they actually do in practice can be two very different things. But even with that said, we went out with this advertising as part of our campaign in Europe. And as you saw there, I mean, it had an environmental message in it, but I think what's also important there for you to see is it began with talking about the performance of the product. Again, that mainstream consumer is going to be interested in performance, and that's how it began. So these types of things that we've done are causing the habit change. In Europe, where this has been running the longest, some data we have for, say, the UK, where about 7 or 8% of loads were washed in cold water. We're now up to nearly 30%. In the Netherlands, where, again, we began at about 7%, we're now up over 50%, and the numbers in the U.S. continue to trend upwards, too. So, again, the ability through product innovation to make a very meaningful improvement, by hitting a specific metric and then enabling mainstream consumers to benefit from that. Let me give you one other example of what we did. If you look at the energy footprint of Procter & Gamble, we found that it's the hot water in the U.S., but if we look at laundry in general and look at what drives the environmental footprint of laundry in the developing world, we find that it is water use. It is not energy, it's water, mainly because most laundry is done by hand. So if you think about how that habit happens in, say, a country like the Philippines, the female head of household will go and draw 4 buckets or basins of water, where she will wash in 1 and then rinse in 3. One way to reduce the amount of water used in there is to develop technologies that actually aid in rinsing so we can reduce the number of buckets or basins that are needed to rinse. And this is where we came up with Downy Single Rinse. This contains technologies that sequester the detergents and enable the consumer to rinse in 1 basin instead of 3. And in this way, we are now reducing the amount of water that is used by half. And let me show you, this is a commercial that ran in the Philippines that talks about that. The individual at the end there was Senator Cayetano from the Philippine Senate, and she agreed to help us bring this messaging to the people of the Philippines, because water scarcity is something that really is a significant issue there in the country. So she helped us get this messaging out. And, we've been able, through the couple of years that this has been in the market, just saving tens of billions of liters of water from people in this habit. So those are just a couple examples of how we've used product innovation to enable consumers to be environmentally sustainable in a meaningful way. I'd like to switch a little bit here to just a couple of other examples of some things that we've done. This is product compaction, where we've been able to compact our products, essentially taking water and fillers out of them. Makes tremendous savings across the life cycle of the product. Product design, these are some things that we've done to reduce PVC packaging, reduce the weight of products. This is some of our razor type packaging, where we've moved from the PVC packaging to a more renewable type of packaging. This is some work that we've done where we've been able to reduce the plastic that is present in our products by modeling the stresses that a bottle undergoes across its life cycle. And in areas of low stress, we're able to take out or thin the plastic there. Huge savings, and in many instances, something that the consumer doesn't even see, but can lead to a lot of materials reduction. I'll spend a couple minutes here on operational improvements, on eco-efficiency. We approach it end-to-end across all of our plants. We have about 150 manufacturing facilities around the world, where we look to find ways to reduce energy, to reduce water, to reduce waste. These are some of the numbers that we've put up over the past few years, where we've done great work by our PS people, product supply people, in reducing energy, water, and CO2 emissions. The one value there that kind of jumps out, this is reduction in waste. And I want to tell you a little bit about that one, because this shows the value of focusing effort in a particular area. about 96% of the raw materials that enter a P&G plant leave as finished product. About 4% do not. We were already recycling or reusing about 2%, but about 2% of the raw materials were really ending up in landfill. And for a company the size of P&G, 2% is a lot of stuff. So we formed what we call the Global Asset Recovery Team. It's a group of about 20 individuals, and their job was to find value in the things that P&G was throwing away. And in many ways, this was product that was off specifications or product that was outdated or things like that were ending up in landfill. So these people's job was to find value in that stuff we were throwing away. And these are some of the things that they've come up with, whereas before maybe a laundry detergent that had been off specification that would have ended up in a landfill, we now have contracts with car washes to sell it to them. Believe it or not, a toothpaste formula has a lot in common with the formulas that clean hubcaps and jewelry. So product that maybe was not right for the consumer could not be put into commerce. We now have contracts to go and have it blended in and reformulated with jewelry cleaners. And we've done that across all of our product categories across the world, and we right now have about 15% of our 140 operations be zero waste to landfill. We've also committed that all new facilities going forward will be LEED certified, kind of setting a foundation now for the company going forward, that as we construct new facilities, they will be with environmental sustainability in mind going forward. Now, even though we believe we've done a lot of good work in this area, and the company's received many awards for its work, we don't believe that we've done enough. We don't believe that we've set the company on a firm enough path to be successful going into the future. This is why we set a long-term vision for the company back in August of 2010, and this is a long-term vision where we are focusing on ensuring that at an end state, P&G is at a place where consumption is sustainable, and we are enabling more and more consumers to be environmentally sustainable. And we believe that end state is when we're at a point that 100% of our products are coming from renewable materials. They are being manufactured in plants running on 100% renewable energy. We continue to develop these products that enable consumers to conserve resources. And then at the back end, we are committing to having zero consumer and manufacturing waste going to landfills. Now, this is the end state. It's going to take us many decades to get there, and we did not put a specific date around accomplishing this. However, to show people that we are serious and we are putting the company on a path toward achieving it, these are some of the specific goals that we've set for 2020. One, to replace 25% of our petroleum-based raw materials with renewables. We ultimately want to get to 100, but we'll get to 25% by 2020. And then you can see some of the other goals that we've set there around materials reduction. I'm trying to drive to 70% cold water washing. These are some of the goals that we set around energy. We want to get to 100% renewable energy. Ultimately, we want to get to 30% by 2020. So just some things that we're doing in that area to kind of set the company on a path to achieve its ultimate vision. So with those two comments about talking about product innovation and operations, that's largely what we've been doing in the area of environmental sustainability. We're also working towards renewable materials in the sense that we have products or plastic now that is coming from sugarcane. We also at a point now where we're beginning to expand our renewable energy, where this is now our first wind turbine in Verwoerd in the Netherlands at our Eems pet food plant. So product innovation and operational efficiencies are those two areas where we've worked largely from the standpoint of the environment. And if I can just take 2 more minutes, I'd like to just mention very briefly some of the things we're doing in the social area, largely because we do see sustainability encompassing both environmental sustainability and social responsibility. And P&G's program in this area is called Live, Learn, and Thrive. It's targeted at children in need around the world. And a couple of things that we're doing in this area. One is in safe drinking water, in delivering safe drinking water to children around the world. This is generally today how children around the world or people in the developing world get their drinking water. Highly contaminated and in many ways leading to many waterborne illnesses and death. P&G developed a purifier of water where it's a packet that within 30 minutes can take 10 liters of the most contaminated water and make it drinkable. And we've been working with a number of partners around the world to deliver billions and billions of these dangerous and safe drinking water to children around the world. We're also partnering with groups like UNICEF and then having the equity of our major brands come together to help work on social causes. This is a program we're doing with UNICEF to eliminate maternal and neonatal tetanus around the world. To date, about 300 million vaccines have been delivered to UNICEF based on the fact that as a consumer buys a package of Pampers, we donate one of these vaccines. So tying the strength of a brand to the solving of a social issue. And then finally, an example that we're doing in the developing world with Safeguard, in bringing hygiene education to children around the world. I love this. Is one of my favorite slides, seeing all these kids so excited about washing their hands. So in this very brief time, I appreciate this opportunity to talk about P&G's program in sustainability. A great focus in the environmental area, looking at product innovation, targeting consumers, the mainstream consumer, by giving them products that don't ask them to accept trade-offs, eco-efficiency in our operations, also targeted efforts that whenever you do that, you get great results, as you saw in our waste, and then the programs that we have around the world enabling and helping children in need. So with that, I'll close and happy to answer any questions.
So, Len, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Very good. It's Peter again. Listen, thank you very much indeed for that. That's been fantastic, both on the environmental side, but also just to finish off with a flavour of some of your social activities. And I think particularly your work around R&D and product development and also operational efficiency are pioneering and really interesting for this audience as we think through some of these new business models and how they're shifting. Now, I have a few questions, but rather than that, why don't I just go straight into some of the questions that we have been receiving whilst you've been talking? Are you okay for me just to put a few of those to you and you give us some answers?
Yeah, glad to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Len. So the first question is, going back to quite early in your presentation, you mentioned that you had a team across the organization of 700 people working on sustainability. And there's a question in here from Quentin, which says, how do you manage and embed those into the business and some of the dynamics like the center versus the periphery? Is it a top-down, bottom-up approach? How do you go about making the whole add up to more than the sum of the parts?
Mm-hmm. A very good question. The vast majority of that 720 people are responsible for ensuring that new products that P&G puts on the market are not a health risk to consumers, not an issue for the environment, and then they work with the regulators around the world to ensure our products are in compliance and then to do registration so we can go into commerce. So the vast majority of those people are what I would call the environmental responsibility people. There's very few people in the opportunity phase within my organization, largely because in order to get sustainability to be successful with P&G, it had to be embedded into the rhythm of the company's business as things that we normally do. My department, working with our CEO and senior leadership, set the goals and the vision for Procter & Gamble, but then each business unit, each region, each function has an individual that is accountable for bringing that vision and those goals to life for their specific business area. So, for example, within our fabric care area, the one that markets laundry detergents, there is an individual within that organization who champions the sustainability program for that organization. Now, what's important, and I think this is kind of key here too, in the sense that we mentioned that we do not ask consumers to accept trade-offs as a higher cost or decrease in performance. We also hold ourselves internally to the same standard, such that anything we do in sustainability has got to build the business in some way and has got to be competitive with other projects that the company wants to put forward. So, for example, when we put that wind turbine up in the Netherlands at our pet food plant there, that was a capital investment. that the ROI on that capital had to be the same as any other capital investment that P&G makes. So we do not ask the company to accept trade-offs also when it comes to sustainability. And to me, when it's done that way, you set up a situation where people want to do sustainability because it builds the business, and you avoid sustainability being something that's just something else to do or a lay-on, and it does not necessarily get the attention. So when we do things like Tide Cold Water and Downy Single Rinse, we're able to show the business how that's going to build share, build profit, therefore people want to do it. When we do the eco-efficiency, such as reducing waste in the plant, we can show how that will lead to specific cost savings for the company. So again, people want to do it.
That's very clear, Len. Thank you. I have to say that I think we're probably getting more questions than we've ever had on any of the previous speaker sessions. So I'm not sure I'm going to get them all into you. We might have to fire a few at the same time, but let's keep going one at a time for now. So Michelle from the World Policy Institute says, very interesting, Len. What is the trade-off between water and energy use in laundry detergent formulation?
That is a very good question. What we find is really it's geographical because in the United States, what we're finding is, as I mentioned, the predominant thing is energy, but we've been working with appliance manufacturers to drive to low water use machines. So you are seeing less and less water use in the U.S. in the laundry process just by the general development of the technologies. And in fact, as you work with the appliance manufacturers, like us, they want to look at how best to meet their consumers' needs as it relates to sustainability. Like us, they are finding that consumers want to be working with less energy and less water. So it very much has to be a partnership between the ones creating the machines and the ones creating the detergents that work in the machines. That's why we have such great partnerships there. In the developing world, there really isn't any trade-off or any debate there because it is largely a hand type of operation there, so water is the predominant thing.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thanks, Len. And moving on to the next question. So this is Peggy from China, and she runs the joint US-China Clean Energy Initiative, and she's asking, if you had to ask Chinese mayors for something in terms of policy, if you ask them for one single measure or a few measures that would really make a difference, what would they be? And she uses the example of should they ban machines that use water above a certain temperature? What kind of policy intervention would create an enabling context for you?
Wow, that is a very interesting question. A couple of things come to mind. If I think about a lot of what we're doing here, we believe that all the issues of sustainability are going to be solved by innovation. So anything that they are able to do that enable a corporation like P&G to best innovate or, removing barriers to innovation would be a tremendous help. There's a couple of other things that could be helpful. If you look at our renewable energy goal, which is set at 30%, there's a reason it's set at 30%. We believe that within the fence line of P&G plants, we can achieve 30% renewable energy. So this is stuff we control. Wind turbines on our property, solar power on our roofs. So the things that we control, we can get to 30%. To go beyond 30%, we're going to need renewable power delivered to us. So there's going to have to be national infrastructures developed over the next decades that deliver renewable power. And until that happens, companies like P&G are not going to be able to get beyond things like the 30%. So that's something that governments are going to have to be helpful with. So anything that can be done, within those nations that help develop those national infrastructures around things would be helpful. I know China's been very, very open and very helpful in renewable energy, especially around wind power. So continuing to do those things that enable corporations like P&G to go beyond what they're able to do by themselves, I think would be helpful.
Thanks, Len. So two questions here relating to similar topics. The first from Kristen Rechberger at National Geographic, and she asks, can you say more about packaging and the related cycle of waste and how best to minimize that? And then similarly, in terms of topic, Leo Schlesinger asks, how do you go about certifying procurement of raw materials and how do you ensure that those are sourced in a responsible and sustainable way?
Very good questions. Let's talk about the waste first. When you look at waste, you have to separate it into geographies that have integrated waste management systems like we largely see in the developed world, so like the United States, and then places where you do not have integrated waste management, so like some of the developing geographies. In the developed world, most of our efforts there are being driven to increase recycling. We were okay in the U.S., for example, when it comes to recycling. We're okay in Europe when it comes to recycling, getting about half the materials recovered. There is huge opportunity there, more and more, to get a lot of this stuff saved and put back into a very viable waste stream. And we've learned that when you put attention towards waste, you are able to achieve great things. So we are working through trade associations now to help increase the ability for recycling and then to develop better infrastructure for recycling to occur. You heard me mention that P&G was phasing out of PVC packaging. Well, that's one way that we're doing that. PVC is largely not recycled. So, by getting out of PVC packaging into plastics that are recycled, you're, again, diverting things from going into the waste stream. Our package designs are focused on materials reduction. There is about, I estimate now, over the past couple of years, we've probably taken 600 million pounds of packaging out of the system through the development of better packages and stuff. The compaction that we're doing with our products leads to great packaging savings. We recently compacted in the United States our liquid laundry detergents, just a simple 2X compaction. When you compact the laundry detergents, just that simple 2X compaction in the U.S., that took 140 million pounds of stuff out of the system. So on the scale that we're dealing with here, even a small change can be very impactful. In the developing world, where they do not have integrated waste management systems, there are laws in the books for most of those governments to actually establish them, but the issue they have is the governments don't have the money to create landfills and create that infrastructure. So we've been working with a number of organizations to understand or develop a business model where someone can make money by handling waste in the developing world. And we have a pilot study going on in the Philippines right now, where we developed a business model where waste can be collected, it can be processed into valuable types of materials such as recycled or energy at the end. And we're hoping that if we can get this business model established where someone can make money by handling waste, we can bypass the need for the governments to establish these integrated waste management systems and actually begin to address some of these waste problems there. On your second question about procurement, we do have very strict supplier guidelines for our suppliers that they need to adhere to. People want to be a supplier of Procter & Gamble, and in order for them to do that, they need to sign on in their contracts to do certain things, largely, ensuring the environmental viability of their products and practices and such. And then we do spot checks and do site visits to our suppliers around the world to make sure that they are indeed adhering to the principles set by the company.
Thanks, Len. That's really clear and helpful. Len, we've got about 3 minutes left to go. I want to give you two choices. There are still a ton of questions coming in. So either I hand you a few now and you try and take as many as you can, or we could also circulate a few written questions to you and just share them with the group if you had time to put a couple of lines together. I don't know how that works for you, if you'd be up for that, or if you want to run over for a few minutes.
I'm happy to run over for a few minutes. Whatever you think is best. I have time.
Okay, if you don't mind running over for a few minutes, you've sparked a lot of interest. And actually, the quotes, I don't know if you can see the chat function, but I think the general opinion is that this is one of the best presentations we've had. So look, let me go into another question then from David. This is from our David, as in David Rosenberg, and he asks, how are P&G's sustainability goals used in evaluating business leader performances and remuneration, bonuses, incentives, etc.?
You know, I get that question a lot as to whether sustainability has become something on, our manager scorecards and things like that, and whether they're graded against sustainability deliverables, when it comes to compensation. We do not do that at Procter & Gamble. Our general managers and presidents and such are held to, like most other companies, compensated for their business deliverables from the standpoint of profit and sales and things like that. So I think what we're able to do in sustainability is to show how those presidents can meet their profit and meet their sales goals by incorporating sustainability. So again, we integrate it into the rhythm of the business. It's something that can build the business for them. It is not some add-on that's at the bottom of some chart where they have to check a box in order to get the raise. And again, we believe that is a much better approach to this, of having it be something that's seen of value. I've been doing this for 25 years at P&G, and over the course of my career, I have seen sustainability come and go. Most times when you get a spike in oil prices, everybody rallies around sustainability of how it's important. But then we all do stuff to kind of address it. But then once the price of the oil comes down, all of a sudden people are no longer interested in sustainability. And I've seen this come several times up and down in my career. And I think in the past, when sustainability was important and we did things, to address it, we addressed sustainability as an issue to be managed, as opposed to an opportunity to build the business. And when you address it as an issue, you cause the company to do things that increase cost and increase complexity, such that when the external pressure goes away, the internal interest goes away, because nobody wants to work on things that increase cost and complexity. I think we're at a point in the world now where even if the price of oil comes down, or even if external pressures go away, companies like Procter & Gamble still have got to have a focus on sustainability to ensure success long term. Therefore, you can't address sustainability this time as an issue to be managed. You have to address it as an opportunity to build the business and set the systems in place that do that. And this way, I think you assure sustainability lives in the company for the duration.
Very good, Len. So, look, just to keep it still time-bound for you, I'm going to give you 5 questions for you just to rapid fire, 20, 30 seconds on each, and I'll repeat them if you don't remember them, Len. So I don't expect you to memorize. And these come from a range of people, from John, Peggy, April, and so on. So, April asks, what are you doing in terms of the focus of efforts with regards to business development beyond China and India, and why, especially when you look at the developing world? And there's a sort of subsection of that which says, do you focus on countries where appropriate policies are in place, where emerging middle class is largest, et cetera, et cetera? So that's the first thing, is developing countries beyond China and India. Second thing, Peggy asks, this is a tricky one, I'm sure you get asked it a lot, but how do you reconcile the landfill issue with products like diapers and razor blades and tampons, where in each case there are alternatives that could be more sustainable? So how does P&G see that? Third question is knowledge management. And there's several questions on this. And I think there's a question here from John, and there's another question a little bit earlier from David. How do you share knowledge within P&G? So, for example, across the categories, across the business functions, and so on. But then secondly, John asks also, how do you share beyond the boundaries or the traditional boundaries of the organization into the supply chain? And then the final question, why not have no green component whatsoever in terms of marketing from a consumer perspective, given the way you showed your consumer research? Why would you not just, because there's a perception in the US at least, but also probably more broadly, that green means lower quality, less effective product. So developing countries, the product issue of diapers, et cetera, knowledge sharing inside and outside, and then finally this issue of the green positioning with the consumer.
A lot of very, very good questions, and I'll do my best to try to answer them. To go beyond China and India, well, in the area of social responsibility, P&G has about 80 programs, aimed at these children in need and around the world and things like that. So although I gave a couple of examples here in the social area, around our work with Pampers and the work that we're doing in hygiene, there are about 80 programs like that. So if you go to our website, pg.com, and type in and see sustainability at the top banner, you'll be able to see a lot of those programs that we do. The question about the landfills is a very good one, and I think that's going to be an area of the need for continued focus within P&G. Let's just talk about the disposable diapers. At the end of the day, P&G sees its mission as improving consumers' lives. There is an incredible health benefit to the use of disposable diapers versus, say, cloth diapers. An incredible health benefit from the standpoint of better hygiene in the homes and certainly in the standpoint of skin health of the children. My children now are 15 and 20. Not that long ago, they were in disposable diapers. It's hard for me to think of a world where we don't have disposable diapers because of the benefit that consumers have. Now, even though we make a product that does end up in landfills like that, and although the primary focus is on meeting the consumer need and improving their lives, we do believe a responsibility is there to help address some of these issues around the solid waste. A lot of the effort around Pampers has been in materials reduction. We've been able to reduce the weight and the size of the diapers about 40% over the past 10 years or so through increased technologies. And each time we reduce the size of the diaper and the weight of the diaper, we boost its performance at the same time. So a great focus from the R&D side to address this issue is one. We've also reduced the packaging of Pampers by about 70 or 80%. And then also taking a responsibility to just divert waste from landfills that can be diverted from landfills. Today, disposable diapers have to go there, but there's a lot of material that end up in landfills that don't need to be there. So a lot of our effort on the recycling side is done in that regard. So it's more of a holistic approach that looking at waste from the standpoint of reducing the amount that enters a landfill and then ensuring that as little ends up there that can be retrieved. The knowledge management is a very good question, too, in the sense that we have a number of internal teams that allow communications to occur. We have our global sustainability board within the company, and it is composed of myself, the chief technology officer, the chief marketing officer, the chief product supply officer, and then our chief external relations officer. And in this way, we are able to coordinate the efforts across the major functions within the company. Because as you can see, if you take a product like a cold water washing detergent, you need R&D, you need product supply, you need marketing, and then you need the external relations groups all working together to make that successful. So we bring it together at the highest levels within the company. And then each function in each business unit, I mentioned, recall that they have individuals that are accountable for sustainability. They have teams within those organizations that actually work together to coordinate within a function. And then all those individual leaders all come together where we can share best practices. And then we have newsletters, we push communications out to the organization, and then of course Earth Day is a big event within Procter & Gamble where formal programs are in place with, again, the focus on education. And then the last question really got into why not on the green component. If you look at how the cold water washing detergents got marketed in Europe, there is Ariel, that's the mother brand, and the cold water messaging was made part of the mother brand, the major brand there. In the U.S., there is still regular Tide, and then there is the a flanker of Tide Cold Water, where we chose to have a separate product there. And again, it is all based on the marketing and the consumer needs and what is best for the consumer. Right now, we found that in the U.S., there were still a lot of consumers that wanted their traditional Tide detergent. That's why we made it a flanker. That does not mean over time we can't begin to bring more and more messages to the cold water washing on these other brands. P&G just came out with Tide Pods, which is a single-dose product. It's not called Tide Pods Cold Water, but there's a lot of cold water messaging associated with that product because a lot of the technologies that enable the cold water cleaning are in that. So you're going to begin to see some of this blurring going forward in that. But at the end of the day today, we want consumers to switch to the sustainable habits, and we're going to have to do that in ways that best enable that with the right messages to them.
Straight. Look, I think that's been I don't think it would be unfair to say that's been a tour de force. It's been fantastic to hear your insights across a broad range of topics. So on behalf of everyone on the call, thank you very much indeed. And I'll hand back to David. I know that April may have solved some of her mute problems, so I think she's just going to give us a couple of minutes. But thanks very much, Len. That really was fantastic.
Thank you.
Back to you, David.